is to unpick how we got where we are. And there's a particular duty, I would say, on Islamic intellectuals at this time to go back to the Quran, go back to the Hadith, and unpick how we got to this kind of genealogy of evil, in which anti-Semitism, Nazi style, has become an acceptable discourse. It's not, it's completely anti-Islamic, right? And there is another irony of history here, which is that for Muhammad, suicide was unlawful. Suicide, the killing of oneself, was an unlawful act. God gives us our existence, because God is existence, and insofar as we exist, we participate in that. It's a divine mercy, and we should live our lives as much as possible to their fullness, and encourage everyone else to. And that's what the energy of love is encouraging other people to live. And you don't, and if you're upset or depressed, then you need healing. You need to go and sort that symptoms, but not kill yourself. That was Muhammad's position. So the whole idea of suicide bombing, which is the weapon of choice tragically, of some Muslim jihadists, in this genre, is un-Islamic, utterly and totally. It's against every single Islamic teaching of Muhammad, of the Hadith. Also, the idea of courtesy and chivalry in warfare. You don't kill non-combatants. So, idea of doing suicide bombing that blows up people, or indiscriminate rocket firing into civilian areas, is utterly un-Islamic. It's a problem. Okay, so what else can we do? I just want to say that, of course, the Israeli indiscriminate bombing of Gaza, built up area, is also very problematic, to say the least, under international law. I've read some professors of international law who say that it is legitimate to bomb civilian targets if it can be proved that military targets are hiding there, like in the basement or in some part of the building, and if rockets are being stored there and so on. There's an arguable justification. Then tragically you have to then maybe bomb those things, having given prior warning to the civilian population to leave the area, which is what Israel did. So under international law there's a defence, there's an argument that can be mounted. It goes back to these rockets then, and I would say that there's a problem with the Hamas leadership, and this is where I think Muslim intellectuals should really get a grip on this, is that Islam is not about self-destruction, and it's not about violence, it's about peace. I've studied Islam for many years. I taught at the Muslim College with Dr. Zaki Badawi, and I've completed a commentary on the Quran, going into the Arabic, into the innermost meanings of the text. But as a transpersonal historian, I'm fascinated by Islamic studies, and in a tradition of European thinkers who've looked at Islam, like Goethe and Thomas Carlyle and people, who first began to say, look, Islam might have something to offer the Western mind. I think that Islam has a tremendous richness, and I've been very interested in Sufism for many years. But I don't think Islam has been fully realised and understood yet, also by many so-called Muslims. From an esoteric perspective, a transpersonal perspective, it's a promise of peace, like a flickering flame on the horizon, but it's not been actualised, it's not been realised. And so I think it gives Islam a very bad name when violence is seen to be associated with it. And I would say that the Palestinians are going to be far more likely to get a state, an independent state called Palestine, comprised Gaza and the West Bank, with a railway hopefully connecting them, so they're like one state. I would say to my Palestinian brothers and sisters, the best way to get that is to adopt non-violence as the strategy. That's the true strategy of Islam. It's also the true strategy of Christianity. And there are many Christians in Gaza and in the West Bank. Gaza was a very sacred place for Christianity, a number of sacred churches there in ancient times. Disciples of Christ were there. It's a very holy place. If the Palestinians adopted non-violence as their strategy, declared it officially, this is our strategy. If Hamas came out and said, okay, we thought about this, we were wrong, we're going to stop throwing rockets, going to adopt non-violence, you know, I think they'd get a state much, much quicker than if they continue the path of violence, because they're going to get periodically these attacks from Israel as they continue firing rockets. You know, it's just a no-win situation. So there has to be a total cessation of the rocket attacks, but it has to start from the heart. You know, the Muslims and Christians of Gaza, my brothers and sisters, have to really wake up and realise that route is not helping. It's not going anywhere. If you adopted the strategy of non-violence, you don't give up the struggle, you don't give up the striving for your state, you don't give up jihad, you take up the real jihad, which is a jihad of non-violence, a jihad of spiritual work, you know, and study and prayer, which is what the whole thing's supposed to be about. Okay, so what else can I say here that's of relevance? I think I want to just reflect on this from a British perspective and a Commonwealth perspective. I'm Canadian, British dual citizen living in Scotland at the moment. I've lived in Wales and London, and my institute was set up at the University of London. I've taught at the University of Oxford, and I love the Commonwealth, right? We're about to celebrate the Commonwealth Games here in Glasgow, which is not far, and I run the Commonwealth Interfaith Network, which is a group of religious leaders, elders, seekers of wisdom from all faiths. The Commonwealth of 54 nations is the largest grouping of nations, you know, in a block on the planet, and includes India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Malta, British Guyana, you know, lots and lots of countries in Africa, Southern Africa, and Namibia, and so on, and every faith on the planet. But we abide by certain values and principles, and I once was running meetings in Parliament in the House of Lords on peace and ethics, and the leader of the then Palestinian government came along, Afif Safie, who was then the ambassador from Palestine to Britain. And he told me, it was very interesting, he said that when independence comes to Palestine, they actually want to join the British Commonwealth of Nations because they were a former mandate territory, and a lot of people in Palestine still look back on the British era as a beneficent era, relatively speaking. I know that sounds difficult to believe, but and by joining the Commonwealth, Palestine then accesses instruments of state building, help with the legal system, help with policing, help with security, help with development above all, help with education. You know, the Commonwealth Ministers of Education and Environment and so on. It then becomes part of a club, and I don't see why we can't speed this up. Why can't Palestine and Gaza immediately declare a ceasefire, but not only just a ceasefire, an actual declaration of non-violence, right? Why can't they say, yes, we're going to stop this rocket stuff, and then begin talks of accession for the Commonwealth? I mean, the current Commonwealth Secretary General, you know, obviously the Queen is the head of the Commonwealth, I think would look extremely favourably on that if it was accompanied by a peace treaty, permanent, between a newly independent Commonwealth country called Palestine, including Gaza, and Israel, a permanent peace treaty that would end this stupid fighting forever, right? And I think the British people and culture as a whole would really support this. And I mean the Commonwealth as well as the British people. You know, we're scattered in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, whatever. Because we do have a kind of karmic debt here. It was the British who got the mandate for the whole of Palestine from the League of Nations after World War I, 100 years ago, 1914 outbreak. And then, in their own muddled way, were trying to be fair to both the Jews and the Arabs of Palestine. We all know the story of Lawrence of Arabia promising, you know, an Arab state in Syria and Palestine and so on, and simultaneously Balfour was promising a homeland for the Jewish people. So there were crossed wires. This is in the days when communication was slow, telegrams took a while. But by and large, I think it's true to say that during the 20s, 30s, the British governors in Palestine were trying to be fair to both sides, right? And they were making enemies on both sides. The British were attacked and bombed by extreme Israeli Zionists who were impatient at the speed in which they were getting their homeland, and also attacked by extremist Arabs and Muslims who were very annoyed that any Jews were coming into the region. So, and what happened then in 1948, as this conflict escalated, and particularly as the Jews started attacking the British troops and there were bombings like the King David Hotel, then I think the British panicked and cut and run and left Israel and Palestine basically to just stand on its own. Israel then declared independence, and Ben Gurion read out the declaration, you know, we the Israeli people declare our state. And at that time, the Israelis would have been very happy, I think, for Palestine to have declared independence at the same time. We would have seen a two-state solution come into being then. But instead, the Palestinians made a terrible strategic error. Instead of doing that, what they did was they, in effect, declared war on the new state of Israel. And in alliance with neighbouring Arab countries, Jordan, Syria, and so on, they then invaded the little new state of Israel that was just launched. And a horrible war broke out. But the Israelis managed to win it, which was quite a fluke, really, given that there were a lot of Arabs and not many Israelis. And that's how the Palestinians then were forced out to Gaza. Now, I know the Nakba has been told from many different angles, and you know, some modern Israeli historians, Ilan Papi and others, have revealed how, you know, the Israelis were pre-armed and ready to do mass expulsions and you know, act in unlawful and gruesome ways against the Palestinian population. You know, all this has got to come out. There's no place to hide from the spirit of truth, and apologies need to be made, absolutely. But nevertheless, those were the facts. It was a war setting, and that's how the enclave of Gaza got to be there. But what I feel as a British Canadian citizen is that we made a mistake. The British people made a mistake at that time. And rather than just sort of cutting and running from the mandate, what we should have done was stay until two states were declared. We should have encouraged the people of Israel, yes, you know, have your state, you deserve it, you've just lived through the Holocaust, it's been a nightmare, you need a state, you know, here it is, we'll help. But also, we should have said to the Palestinians, absolutely, you deserve a state too. You know, you are also the residents here. You've been here for centuries. Your families have been running this country. You're amazing people. You know, you have a very deep ancient culture, going right back to the roots of Christianity. Many present-day Palestinians walking around are probably direct descendants of the family of Jesus, for God's sake. You know, we're talking the early Aramaic settlers of the region, and they're incredible people. And of course you need a state, you know, and the Muslims and the Arabs that came later are wonderful people too. This could be a microcosm of peace as a state of Palestine. So what we should have done as the British is refuse to leave until both had come into being. Instead, I think what happened was the British colonialists at the time, the Foreign Office, panicked. It was run by, I'm sorry to say, amateurs. The Labour Party didn't know how to run an empire. They didn't understand about duty or responsibility, and they were just so full of their own anti-colonial rhetoric that they just kind of abandoned everything, as they did in India and then did in Israel and Palestine. I think if Churchill had won the election, he wouldn't have done it. He would have made sure there were two states left. But what I'm saying is it's not too late. What I'm saying is that the British and the British Commonwealth, you know, we have our own Foreign Office, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. William Hague has just been succeeded by, you know, and Philip Hammond. What they should be doing, and I'm speaking, you know, to them as it were, their conscience, is really working with the Palestinians and the Israelis to get a ceasefire, a peace treaty, and to take seriously this idea of Palestine joining the Commonwealth as a proposal. And what's interesting is there's a new book out by Alison Weir here, Against Our Better Judgment, about how the USA became, in a sense, bamboozled into giving 100% support to the State of Israel, as opposed to a position that some people at the time were saying, including people in the Department of State, senior diplomats in the American government, were saying, we shouldn't support Israel only. We shouldn't be like giving Israel a blank check of our support as a nation, as the USA, because our duty should be to ensure justice in the region, and we should be helping a Palestinian state come into being as well, equally. And that's the best way to love the nascent Israel, is to make sure that justice comes for her neighbouring peoples as well. And this is latest research by Alison Weir that's just come out, against our better judgment. And I'm really sort of saying that if the British had had the insight and the vision to say, we're not leaving till there's two states, that's our duty as the mandate holders here, I think America would have supported that. They would have said, yeah, well, of course there should be two states. Look, there's two kinds of different people here. There's Palestinians and Israelis. And since they don't seem to want to live together in one state, then a two-state solution is the only thing we can go for.